Bully Resistance Show is brought to you by Nathan Alfred Insurance, an independent insurance agency located in Vienna, West Virginia. They specialize in auto, home, life, and business insurance. What makes this agency unique is your ability to shop the market for you. The Bully Resistance Show is brought to you by Planet Fitness. Come check out your new and improved Planet Fitness. I'm a member of Planet Fitness, and they have all new strength equipment, tanning beds, rowing machines, and more. Starting at just $10 a month, you can join Planet Fitness, home of the judgment-free zone, where members experience a hassle-free, non-intimidating environment. Please see club or visit planetfitness.com for more information. The Bully Resistance Show is also brought to you by Berkshire Hathaway Home Service Real Estate Center as a part of their community outreach. They truly believe that selling houses is important, but helping make our community a better place to live is even more important. The Bully Resistance Show is also brought to you by Valley Chapel United Methodist Church and United Methodist Church located in Fairmont, West Virginia, worshiping, praying, and living the Word of God as a family. Also want to thank Bobby and Michelle Jones, Jeff Belt, Pamela Sayre, Rick Modisett, Connie Pample, Jerry and Karen Gartrell, Crossroads Church. You can help us fight bullying in the public schools and help support the Bullying Resistance Show with David Wells. For more information, go to www.davebond.org. That's www.davebond.org. Welcome, everyone, to the Bully Resistance Show with David Wells, nationally known smooth jazz artist, CEO and co-founder of the Chocolate Jazz Foundation, and the co-host of a 2-hour syndicated radio program called Chocolate Jazz Radio. Bully Resistance is a weekly 1-hour show that's a motivational, informative, and inspirational program. We will have interviews with musicians, actors, government officials, politicians, psychologists, counselors, and just average day citizens. Of course, the topics will include making the right choices, never giving up desire, discipline, determination, bullying in public schools or workplace and in your community, bully resistance and prevention, self-defense, jiu-jitsu, and current affairs, and much, much more. And if you're ready, we are. Here's your host, David Wells.
I want to thank everyone for tuning in to another episode of the Bully Resistance Show with David Wells. My name is David, and today we have a criminal defense attorney, Travis Sayre, from actually Marietta, Ohio. Also, he is actually a black belt in Judo. So at this time, I want to introduce Travis to the Bully Resistance Show. Travis, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thank you, Dave. I appreciate being here. I have one correction though.
Okay.
That's in. I'm out of Parkersburg, West Virginia, which is right across the river.
Well, that's even better. I learn something every day. Hey, let me ask you this before we get too far into the program. Can you just give the listeners just a little background about yourself?
Sure. I've lived in West Virginia my entire life. I was born and raised in Parkersburg, West Virginia. Went through the public education system here. Graduated from Parkersburg High School in 2001. I went to West Virginia University at Parkersburg, which is a little community college in Wood County, where I earned my bachelor's in business. And I also started my judo program, or started learning judo at that school as well, at the WP Judo Club.
Okay.
And then in 2008, I was accepted and went into WVU Law and graduated in 2011. Shortly after then, I returned to Wood County, and after a year of working for a veterans disability attorney, I hung out my own shingle and started helping veterans and criminal defendants.
Okay. There's one thing that I noticed when I was actually putting the program together, and it was where you received it was actually called, I guess, the Citizenship Award from Fraternal Order of Police. Can you tell me what that's all about or what that consists of?
Yeah, when I was in high school in my senior year, 12th grade, I did a lot of, I guess you say, volunteer work for the guidance office at the time. And the way I understood it, every school would submit an application to the Fraternal Order of Police. And I guess my volunteer work for the guidance office merited that I got to win that award. We went down to the Parkersburg City building, and they had some police officers there, and several and the other recipients were there, and we had a little ceremony, and it was a great honor for me.
Wow. And how long ago was that then, Travis?
How long ago was that?
Yeah.
Well, I would say that happened I graduated in 2001. That happened in late 2001. So I'd say if the math is correct, that's probably 17 years. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I don't know about you, but one thing, getting into jiu-jitsu a little bit, one thing I've noticed about being involved in jiu-jitsu is the different kinds of people that, train. You got, attorneys, you got surgeons, you got musicians, engineers, computer programmers. I mean, anyone, can actually train jiu-jitsu. And what was funny is that it wasn't actually until, several months later, after I met you, that I found out that you were a criminal defense attorney. And but anyway, one of the things that I have to say that I admire about you, it's just not that you're just an attorney, but just knowing what you had to go through to become an attorney. I mean, if anybody does any type of research on what it takes to be an attorney and what's involved, there would have to be a little bit more respect for that person. And I heard Joe Rogan say this is maybe, I don't know, about a week or 2 weeks ago, which I think he really nailed it. He said, if you look at someone that's extremely well off, like, let's say, for instance, Kevin Hart, someone who's very famous and successful, and all you see is him now. You see him flying around in these private jets, and he's wearing these new pair of sneakers every day, and he's driving around in Bentleys, and you just see that. But a lot of people don't see him being a young kid in Philadelphia, going to the open mics night after night after night. And there's a progression that people don't see, all the ups and downs that people like you, or musicians or authors or attorneys, doing all the hard work, going through all the ups and downs. And, but it's just when you do all the right things, you get better, you become successful. And I think it's just, cause that's what it takes now. I mean, in a small town, a lot of people look at people, if they're a doctor, they're driving a nice car, or they're attorney like yourself. It's just like, wow, he has it made. But they don't really, like I said, they don't see you taking all the time, all the years, that it takes to be a lawyer. But anyway, that being said, off on a tangent, when did you know that you wanted to become a lawyer?
I knew I wanted to be a lawyer the beginning of my 12th grade year. So I was probably about, my birthday's in December, so I was about 17 or 18, just turned 18 when I decided to make that decision.
Now, was there anybody in your family that was a lawyer, or that encouraged you at all, or just something you just thought of? And
No, I'm a first generation attorney, so there was nobody in my family that really inspired me to do that. And really what it was, because when you're 17 and you're young and male, you can try to impress women, right?
Sure.
And so there was this young girl who was talking to me one day about wanting to be a lawyer. And that was what her goal in life was, what her desire was. So I just was like, well, yeah, I want to be a lawyer too. And so I was in the guidance office, and so I'd have something to talk to her about. I would sit there, and when I didn't have any work, because when I was in the guidance office, I did a lot of volunteer work for them.
Sure.
I would help them with paperwork, and if they needed to call a student in to help with, part of the process of what they did was they would help students prepare for their future, prepare for graduation, going to college, trade school, anything like that.
Right.
So there were a lot of materials in there on different schools, medical school, law school. So I started researching law school so I could impress this girl. And what ended up happening was, I didn't get the girl, but I did get the itch to go to law school. And so that's really what inspired me. It wasn't anything, there wasn't this big epiphany, I should go to law school or anything like that. It was just basically a young man trying to impress a young girl. In hindsight, from what I've seen between lawyers and doctors, in the long run, I should have probably went to medical school, but I'm happy with the decision that I made.
Now, let me ask you something, Travis. When you decided to go, to go to college and become a lawyer, did you realize what was all involved in becoming a lawyer? Like, going through the 7-8 years of school and taking the bar exam and everything else, or do you just sort of dropped in your lap?
You know what? Neither. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know how to get there, but nothing dropped in my lap either. It's a process, and the first thing you do if you have young listeners who are getting ready to graduate high school, and they have a particular field in mind, what I recommend they do is reach out to people in that field, see what they need to do, to get into that field, and to talk to them to see if that's something they actually want to pursue, and it's just not some pipe dream. I just lucked out in that, being a lawyer fits my personality, and just imagine if that girl had wanted to been an accountant. That would have been horrible for me if I had done that. But going back to that, this is kind of how it went. Like I said, I went to WVUP,
right,
and I had a scholarship to go there. I was just going to go there as a transfer student for 2 years, and then maybe transfer to Morgantown, or possibly Marietta, because they have a nice private college over there. And they had a great faculty at the time at WUP, and I got into the business program, and there were some great advisors there.
Okay.
And my advisor at the time his name was Sai Sakarat. He was Persian. He was from Iran. He's still teaching out there, I believe. But anyhow, he gave me great advice, because he said, he didn't know anything about being a lawyer. He was a doctor in economics. But he did say that when it comes to degrees, he knew a lot of lawyers went and got a pre-law degree or political science degree. And,
sure.
His opinion was, you should get a business degree if you're going into something like that, because if you decide you don't want to be a lawyer, you have something else to back on, to go back on. Whereas, political science, it can be difficult to find work with certain types of degrees. So anyway, after him, he sent me to another person in the business department named Dr. Bob McCloy, who was also, aside from being a professor, was also an attorney. So he and I had some discussions, and it just kind of snowballed after that. I ended up doing quite well at WP, marking high grades, and you just kind of start doing the research.
Right. Let me ask you this. So when you were going through, high school and then college, so did things come easy to you? I mean, did you have to really study hard, or it was, how was that?
I'll be honest. I coasted through high school and college, and I got pretty good grades. If I had tried, I probably would have got straight A's. But I just the classes were very easy for me, and so it wasn't a thing that stressed me out. And I usually ended up just doing my homework and then following my own pursuits in high school and college.
Okay.
So it wasn't like a thing where I struggled.
Right.
The downside to that was when I hit law school, because school had come easy to me so long, I had difficulty studying and getting as good a grades as other students, because law school is a different type of institution completely than high school or college.
Right. One of the things that I think that a lot of people don't know about being a lawyer, and I'm sure that being a lawyer can be high stress. It can, long hours. I'm sure that you have, rising workloads where you have shrinking of staff and which of course translates into more work hours for you or lawyers. And then you have to deal with the Soaring Law School Debt that you have to deal with. And it's becoming a more competitive job market. But can you tell me some ups and downs that you have gone through actually being a lawyer? Yeah,
those are some basic symptoms of being a lawyer. A lot of lawyers, including myself, we deal with some issues like anxiety. We deal with issues like depression.
Right.
I don't drink or do drugs, but there's a higher rate of substance abuse among lawyers in the country than there are other professions, and that's because there's a higher rate of anxiety and depression amongst lawyers than other professions in the country. If you look at the top 10 professions, lawyers will usually be in that top 10. Different polls obviously have us at different positions, but it can be lonely work. It can be isolating.
Right.
For the most part, people just don't like lawyers. You can sit there and listen to a discussion about lawyers, and people will, for the most part, they'll just start tearing lawyers down. There's all these lawyer jokes, and that kind of has an effect on people in my profession, because there's a lot of good people that do a lot of good work.
Right.
For instance, with my field, let's talk about criminal law for a moment.
Sure.
People, for the most part, really like prosecutors, because prosecutors are putting away the bad guys. Prosecutors are the ones who are holding, criminals accountable for their actions. They
Sure.
don't necessarily like criminal defense attorneys, because we're the ones who are trying to get the drug dealers out of jail. We're the ones who are defending murderers. We're the ones who are defending sex offenders. And so, people, I've had this question asked to me a lot: how can I sleep at night because of that? And it's never bothered me, and I'll tell you why. Because as a criminal defense attorney, my job is to protect and ensure that everyone is entitled to their constitutional rights. So if I got a drug dealer as a client and the police did not do something correctly in the investigation, and I can get the case dismissed on what we would hear in layman's terms, a technicality or a legal loophole, if I can get that, then that's a good day. I don't like drugs on the street. I don't like drugs. I don't like it that people do drugs. But the United States is a unique country in that we have certain constitution protections
Right.
that need to be protected. And the government sometimes likes to blur those lines. And if they can, the government will try to prosecute somebody that is on that blurred line. And regardless of what the person did, I have to be the shield that says, hey, we have constitutional protections here that you can't cross. We got a line that you can't cross. And because I helped to draw that line, it's
right.
It's not just the right of the drug dealer, it's the rights of every person in the United States that we're fighting for on that point. So a lot of criminal defense attorneys have that attitude that they're protecting people. And so, it's a thing where I don't think the average American understands that sometimes, that if I protect the rights of one person, I'm essentially protecting the rights of everybody.
Right. So let me ask you this. Has there ever been a time when you were actually defending someone where you just knew they were guilty, or you couldn't get along and you're thinking, you know what, this is one time that I cannot do my job, or you just, like you said, you just never had a problem of defending people like that?
Well, we're getting into now more of procedures of how my job works with a question like that, because there's people that I've represented in the past, and what they basically, it comes, I go and when I first meet somebody, the only thing I have usually in my possession before I meet them is what's called a criminal complaint. And that's the legal document written, signed, and filed with the magistrate court by the police officer, basically alleging the crime that is being charged. It's the document that charges the defendant with the crime. Okay, so let's just say that we have an individual that received his first DUI, and he's got this criminal complaint. That's the only thing I have with me when I go to meet that person. And, when I sit down with that person, I read over the criminal complaint with them, and I read over the charges, and then I ask them what happened. A lot of times, and we'll go all the way from the smallest misdemeanor of saying the first DUI up to a murder.
Okay.
The person will tell me what happened. They'll tell me if they did it. They tell me if they didn't do it. If they tell me they did it, we try to find out if there's any legal defense.
Sure.
Is there any, like I had a murder case a few years ago where it was a self-defense situation, and so that's a legal defense.
Okay.
You're saying, the defendant did it, but he had a justifiable cause to have done what he did. On the other hand, I've had clients who said, Mr. Sayre, I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I did it, and I want you to work out the best plea deal for me. And that's
sure.
that's where we're going. That's the strategy that we have. We don't tell the prosecutors that's the strategy that we have, because the only leverage that I have to get any type of plea deal from the state is a trial. Is the risk that the prosecutor is going to lose everything. And so on every case, we have to go hard with it, and we have to go as if we're going to trial. So I might have, let's say I have 10 cases. I've got one guy that says he didn't do it, and I know we're going to go to trial on that one. I've got another guy, and then the other 9 are all guys that want a good plea deal, and I have to prepare to go to trial on those as well. And I have to let the state know that I'm prepared to go to trial on all 10 of them. And so it's to get a good deal on those cases,
Right.
So I mean, it's not a black and white issue of, do you know that your client did it, and then how do you defend them? It's a matter of I sometimes know that the client, the defendant, did something, and I, as my ethical duty, have to represent that person to the best of my ability, because, like I said, there's constitutional rights that need to be protected. Everyone has a constitutional right to a trial.
Right.
The evidence might be overwhelmingly against them, and there's a possibility they'll be found guilty, but they still have that constitutional right to a trial, and I got to make sure that that's protected.
Right. It seems like it is a stressful job. Well, I mean, was there ever a time when you were a lawyer that it was so frustrating where you just wanted to quit?
Oh, yeah, several times.
What made you keep on going then?
I think family support is the biggest. Family and friends are the biggest things in our lives that help us. Mm-hmm. Even when we're so low that we can't see anything else, they pull through for us. So that's always, if I'm given any advice on this, it's that, people need to reach out and, reach out to their family. If their family's too toxic, then they need to reach out and find some friends. I've been fortunate in my life in that I've had very supportive parents.
Right.
My whole life. I've had a very supportive brother, and I've had very supportive friends, through
Sure.
Through law school, and I've also had we haven't talked about this much, but I've practiced judo and aikido since 2005, and
Sure.
I made some good loyal friends in those arts, and I practiced Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for a couple years now, and
Sure.
I've made some very good friends from that. So that's really the big thing that helps people through terrible times.
Yes.
Times of stress, times of loneliness, times of depression.
You know what? I'll mention this to you. Before I got involved in jiu-jitsu myself, my wife and I were sitting down maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we figured that I've been traveling full time for 18 years. And what a lot of people don't realize is, and I was, I've talked with several people about this, or a few people about this, but how lonely my occupation was. Because there was no relationships that I had. Not that I didn't want relationships. It was just that with my job, if I was on the road, I was there for a few hours. Then I got back, on the road or flying to my next destination. And then when I come home, I'm resting up and I'm doing, things around the house. And so there was no opportunities. And and ever since, and really that is one of the reasons why I've stuck it out with jiu-jitsu. I mean, jiu-jitsu or any martial arts is extremely hard, difficult. And, but I had that, relationships with a lot of people, and it really helped to just fill that void. But, not to get off on a different subject, but let me ask you this. Actually, as a criminal defense attorney, of course, in Parkersburg, what cases do you handle the most of, I guess?
Well, if we're talking about just the most cases that you would see as a regular criminal defense attorney in Parkersburg and probably across the state, maybe even across the nation, it's drug cases.
Oh, okay.
That's just going to be, and a lot of the crimes that are you have two types, really. You have the cases that drugs are the primary element of the case, where whether it's a drug trafficking case or a drug dealing case, or you might have something that's like a breaking and entering or a burglary or some sort of battery or kidnapping, and drugs are involved. So, drugs are really one of the, I think right now, I don't have any information on this. This is just personal observation.
Sure.
But I think drugs are, at least in my opinion, one of the driving forces of crime in America right now.
Right.
It's not necessarily poor upbringing or poor economics necessarily. It's just that drugs are forcing people to do things that they probably wouldn't do, and it's driving that force. And it's hard because there's all these stereotypes that exist around the drug culture. And the thing is, Dave, is that drugs are across the board. They're not just something that just poor people do. They're not something that just certain minorities do. They're something that everybody does as far as demographics. I'm not saying everybody does them. I'm saying that there's no demographic that they haven't touched.
Sure, I understand.
You know, they touch people in the poor communities. It touches people in wealthier communities. The difference is the people in the wealthier communities can afford to send their children to better rehabs. They can afford to give their children money so their children don't have to steal to keep their habit alive. So I mean, it's a thing where it's a disease that's really going across America right now.
You know, let me mention this to you. I was I was doing some research and I had Sheriff Steve Stevens on the show a few weeks ago, and we were just touching on the opioid epidemic. And, you know, and I know that you're familiar with this, but West Virginia is actually the number one with the opioid-related overdose deaths in the United States. And then you got Ohio, which is, I think, ranked number 2 or number 3. Let me ask you this. Why do you feel that Ohio or even West Virginia has more drug overdoses than any other state in the country?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons to that. I don't think there's any easy solutions, just as there's no easy causes to it. Because if we're talking about opioids, you know, a lot of people just want to talk about heroin. And so I'll talk about that first.
Okay.
But then I'm going to talk about prescription painkillers, because that's another part of the puzzle.
Okay.
But if we're talking about heroin, there's a couple things here. One, West Virginia is pretty centrally located. If you look at us on the map of the United States, we're kind of centrally located as far as, you know, we're right there at the Midwest, but we're also right there at the East Coast. We just touched the South and we just touched the North.
Sure.
And so you have all of these intersections, you know, the interstates that go through us, and you know, a lot of the drugs are coming out of Chicago, Detroit, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Columbus, Ohio. And if they want to go to the East Coast or to the South, where they're going to go through, they're going to go through West Virginia. And it's the same as a lot of, if you're wanting to go north or from the South and vice versa, you're going to go through West Virginia. So I think part of it's geographic.
Right.
The other thing is, you know, for years, the pharmaceutical companies, and there's research on this. I mean, this isn't just some conspiracy thing. This is, there's organizations that have come out, medical organizations that have come out, saying that this was a primary cause of today's current drug problem, and that's you know, for years the pharmaceutical companies were just making large amounts of money off of opioids. I mean, just obscene amounts of money, and the doctors were you know, kind of pushing them for them. And you know, you have people who would just go in and maybe they have a little pain, and the doctors are just overprescribing those medications.
Right.
And, you know, I don't know the actual statistics on it, but I think there was an article that came out this year that talking about the large amounts of opiate drugs that were transported to certain West Virginia counties.
Wow.
That you know, overwhelmingly, I mean, if everyone in that particular county took every pill that was sent there, they would all be dead from overdoses. I mean, it's just...
Sure.
It's a thing where there doesn't seem any oversight from that. And until that is taken care of, I don't think that we're going to fix the problem with the illegal drug dealers, because we've got the legal drug dealers that are kind of just doing their own thing and getting by with what they want without no real oversight. You know, one of the big things about heroin, and here's a thing that I often do when I have somebody that, because one of the questions I ask every client, do you have a substance abuse problem?
Right.
And whether it's alcohol, heroin, methamphetamines, I ask them that, and I ask them, what substance do they abuse? You know, it's all confidential. I mean, I'm not going to go around and say so-and-so's on heroin. But the reason I ask that is because one of the things I do upon myself when I have a client that I just meet for the first time, and they tell, and a lot of times their crime is related to their substance abuse, is I try to help them get into a rehab. So I need to know a little bit about their history before we proceed on that.
Sure.
And so I started asking people, how did you get on heroin? Because I wanted to know. And because it's not something that people are like, nobody wakes up one day and they're like, I want to try heroin. You know, that's not like a life goal for a lot of people. It's not something where, hey, I think I'm going to try heroin today. No, it's usually the majority of the cases that I've had, people have tried heroin because they were with somebody, either a very trusted friend or a boyfriend or a girlfriend that were hooked on it, and they started. There are other people that were at a party and it was being passed around, and they tried it recreationally because they were there and they were drunk and they weren't thinking about it and made them feel good. And then there's that other percentage of people that try it because they got hooked on painkillers first. And then when they stopped getting access to painkillers, they stopped getting access to the opioids, they started looking out for the opiates on the street. So those are some things that cause the current trend.
Right.
But then you ask them, sometimes, you know, with clients, you get even more personal information from them because they just, it's the thing where, and this is a compliment I've received several times from clients, because they tell me, Mr. Sayre, you really treat, they'll come up to me and say, Mr. Sayre, you really treat people decently. You really treat us, they're talking about criminals, but you really treat us like human beings. I said, well, you guys are human beings. And they said, no, you're different in that you ask how we're doing and you act like you care about us, which is a thing that I do because I want people to get better.
Right.
And so when they find out that I don't have some sort of weird agenda, they open up. And what I found, and I think it kind of goes with your podcast, is a lot of these people are suffering from not just physical traumas, but mental traumas from their past.
Sure.
There's a lot of people that were traumatized as children by an adult, sexually attacked or something like that. And there's other sorts of traumas that they're dealing with from their childhood. And so that's a contributing factor to their desire to use any type of substances, whether they started with alcohol and they moved to heroin at some point with a bunch of drugs in between, and that they're trying to find some sort of escape because they're not wanting to deal with their life.
Right. Well, Travis, let's do this. If you don't mind, I just want to go ahead and I'll take a few minutes and recognize the sponsors and also let the listeners know how they can help support the Bully Resistance Show. That's next.
All right.
The Bully Resistance Show is brought to you by Nathan Alfred Insurance, an independent insurance agency located in Vienna, West Virginia. They specialize in auto, home, life, and business insurance. What makes this agency unique is your ability to shop the market for you. The Bully Resistance Show is brought to you by Planet Fitness. Come check out your new and improved Planet Fitness. I'm a member of Planet Fitness, and they have all new strength equipment, tanning beds, rowing machines, and more. Starting at just $10 a month, you can join Planet Fitness, home of the judgment-free zone, where members experience a hassle-free, non-intimidating environment. Please see club or visit planetfitness.com for more information. The Bully Resistance Show is also brought to you by Berkshire Hathaway Home Service Real Estate Center as a part of their community outreach. They truly believe that selling houses is important, but helping make our community a better place to live is even more important. The Bully Resistance Show is also brought to you by Valley Chapel United Methodist Church and United Methodist Church located in Fairmont, West Virginia, worshiping, praying, and living the Word of God as a family. Also, I want to thank Bobby and Michelle Jones, Jeff Belt, Pamela Sayre, Rick Madison, Connie Pample, Jerry and Karen Gartrell, Crossroads Church. You can help us fight bullying in the public schools and help support the Bullying Resistance Show with David Wells. For more information, go to www.davebond.org. That's www.davebond.org.
Well, thanks for tuning back into the Bully Resistance Show with David Wells. My name is David, and actually we've been talking to a criminal defense attorney, Travis Sayre, and just about the opioid epidemic and the problems that we're facing as Mid-Ohio Valley. I guess I was just thinking, Travis, so is there anything that you think that the city of Parkersburg can do, I guess, to fight against the overdoses then? Or do you feel like, are we understaffed? Do we have enough personnel to keep the drug dealers out? What do you think?
Well, I'm a strong advocate for law enforcement. I think most of the officers that I've met in the community, we were talking about Vienna PD or Parkersburg PD or the Wood County Sheriff's Department, Williamstown, the state troopers. The officers are all pretty good, but I think part of it is that they're understaffed.
Right.
I think that I think when they pick up one drug dealer, two or three are going to replace them because you just have this situation where there's so much money to be made in West Virginia on the drugs that it's not going to faze anybody because the risk is outweighed by the benefits. It's a different lifestyle that somebody who's selling drugs lives compared to somebody like you or me, and that it's a point where they know that at some point they're going to get caught.
Right.
They know they're either going to get caught by the police or they're going to get into a fight with a competing faction and get killed. So I mean, it's a hard and fast lifestyle that just doesn't end well. So they get as much money as they can to live the life that they want to live.
Right.
So you're not going to. I think no matter how many police officers that you hire, I don't think you're going to stop it.
Right.
Because what you're doing is you're stopping a symptom. Right. If you have a disease and you're just treating the symptom, you're not actually treating the disease. And I think that's where we need to start shifting. I'm not saying making cuts to police departments. I think those men and women in blue do a terrific job at what they do, and I'm not advocating cuts for that. Well, what I'm advocating is that we need to have a better system of treatment for individuals that are on these drugs. A lot, and you can, and it's hard to explain, but a lot of there's not that many drug rehab in the state of West Virginia. All right.
Right.
And and it's a difficult thing, and that one, you have to get somebody into one of these rehabs, and not all rehabs are made the same. Something might qualify as a rehab, and it's not as good as even one of your regular mid-tier rehab type facilities, and it's kind of hard to explain, but you have seems to me, from what I've observed, there seems to be very broad standards, and I use that term very, very loosely, I think. But broad standards for what a rehab can be, and so you can have some that just aren't effective, but they've created a system where they can get Medicaid dollars,
sure,
and they're kind of just working that out. And then you have some really good rehabs in the area, but the problem is they're not enough, and they're not necessarily giving people the tools they need to stay sober, because
right.
they're just not enough. It's not that we need more rehabs. We need more people with training and more people that have the ability to help people deal with, because like I said before, if somebody's abusing substances, it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's alcohol. It doesn't matter if it's marijuana. It's either, or even heroin. If they're abusing those substances, it's probably due to either a physical trauma, they're trying to cope with pain, or a mental trauma, and they're trying to cope with something in their past.
Sure,
that they're trying to escape. And so let's talk about coping with pain, and I'm just going to put this out here. I'm a pretty big advocate for I've never smoked marijuana, but I'm a pretty big advocate for the legalization of marijuana, not just medically, but recreationally as well. And I'll tell you why. A lot of the people that I know who were on heroin, and they stopped it. I asked them, well, why did you stop using heroin? And they said, well, they're just like, I switched to marijuana. It does something to help me. And, you look at what studies there are, there's nothing to show any real detrimental effects, any worse than alcohol or cigarettes, with the use of marijuana. So I don't think that's necessarily a drug that is as bad as the other ones. And so if that is something that the legalization can help with people that need to manage their pain or manage their stress or anxiety, then I'm all for that, and I think we're seeing some of those results in the states that have passed it.
See,
but the other thing, well, go ahead, Dave.
I think, I think the reason that so many people are against marijuana is because they don't see people, or they don't talk to people like you do, figuring out why are they on drugs like they are, and how marijuana can actually help them. And I mean, I think they need to be in your shoes before they actually make their own decision or come against marijuana. Now with me, I've never done marijuana or any type of drugs either. But I think you have a better outlook than 90% of the people, because you are around those people pretty much all the time, and you know what the problem is, and that's the thing with when you were saying rehab, I'm thinking, well, gosh, why do we need to rehab them? And you're thinking, well, these are ordinary people. They're just not the lowlifes that that don't have any money. I mean, these are people that like their doctor overprescribed their medication, and it was on painkillers, and so I think there's a big debate that needs to take place on it, and instead of, because everybody's either one-sided or the other, but you do have a lot of truth about what you're saying about the epidemic. Not now, I don't want to get on a different subject, but I wanted to go in a different route. When I was putting this show together, one of the things that I noticed that you mentioned was that your dream job would be a professional writer and author. And I even when I saw you at at the Academy last week, I think I was pretty amazed because you do read a lot, but you paint, and also you want to become an author. When did you start wanting to be a writer or an author?
I would say when I was about 16, I was writing stories that early when I was, I was always imaginative as a child. A lot of people would, it was difficult for me to play normally with my toys because, when I was like 10 or 12, my toys would be segregated into what they were, and they would be battling in some sort of geopolitical war off of the need for grain or energy. And so I was pretty imaginative as a child, and I think that drove part of that inspiration into wanting to be an author. And I've written recreationally off and on since I was about 16.
So let me ask you this: so are you actually working on any projects now?
Yes, I've got a few projects that I'm working on, and one of the things I think, because when you write a lot of like just stuff that's low quality. When you're trying to figure stuff out, especially when you're young, and that's because young people, they just don't have anything to write about.
Right.
They haven't lived a life.
Sure.
And I found because what happened, I was writing a lot before I went to law school, and then law school kind of just, all my energy went into studying and preparing for law school, and so for 3 years I didn't write anything. And then I didn't write anything again up until about, I'd say 2016. And I was on the WVUP website, and I noticed one of my old professors, who was very inspiring to me, by the way. She actually wrote one of my recommendations for law school, Dr. Patricia Gaston.
Okay.
She has since retired from there, but she was teaching a creative writing class in 2016, and I had taken that class about 10 years prior when I was still at school, and I thought, that would probably be fun. So I signed up for it and showed up there one day, and she just, she just screamed in excitement when she saw me come into the classroom, and we had a blast for a whole semester, and I would stay after hours and we'd talk to writing, and it really kind of engaged me and brought that love I had back out.
Right.
And so but what was different compared to when I was in college is now I had something to write about. I had lived the life of a criminal defense attorney.
Sure.
I knew I had a story to tell, and so I started developing a story then, and so that's kind of what I'm working on. Is not so much it's kind of just a novel. From the perspective of a defendant.
Wow. Hey, Travis, I meet as I travel across country and for the 18 years, I have met, I guess, so many people that has a lot of ideas, dreams, but they have all these excuses and barriers that they come up with. And you have to, they have to stop thinking like that. And they think, there's no way to get past, the starting block. And it's just, poor thinking. And I hear people say, I'm stuck in my job that I hate. I have bills to pay, so I don't have the time or the money or the resources to go ahead and start. And I'm not saying to these people, to leave your job. I'm just saying, like, if anything else, put aside a little time each day. And at least, start working towards your ideas and your dreams. And when I hear you talking to me, like we mentioned at the beginning of the show, being a lawyer, you're talking about there's going to be times when you have to put so many hours in a week because that's your profession. But you've actually made the time to start writing and and doing what you love to do. And I have to commend you for that. See, I didn't know that, about yourself, but, let me mention a couple more things, and then we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. I don't know about you, but back in the day, there was actually two or three actors where I watched pretty much all their movies. I mean, it was Jean-Claude Van Damme, it was Chuck Norris, and then Steven Seagal. And the reason that I watched their movies was because, it was action packed and there was martial arts involved and everything else. And I saw, when I was putting this together, I saw where you've actually studied actually several kinds of martial arts. First of all, you're a second degree black belt in Judo, like you mentioned at the beginning of the show. Also, you're a first degree black belt in Aikido, and you studied for 2 or 3 years in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I have to know, in your opinion, of all the three actors that I mentioned, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Chuck Norris, and Steven Seagal, which one do you think was the better in combat sports or martial arts?
I would say if we're talking about who could beat up who, is that what we're talking about?
Because the reason why I'm saying that is because
hands down, Chuck Norris could take on both in their prime. Chuck Norris could take down Steven Seagal and Jean-Claude Van Damme. There's no doubt in my mind about that.
Okay. Let me ask you this. So can you tell us why and when you got involved in martial arts?
Yeah. So it actually goes back to when I was 16. I didn't get involved in martial arts right then. I didn't get involved in martial arts until 2005, so I was probably around 22, 23. But when I was 16, I was kind of a lonely, loner kid. And remember when I said I kind of followed my own pursuits? Sure. And one of those was the study of philosophy. So I got into reading a lot of Greco-Roman philosophy at the time in high school, and one of my go-tos was Plato. That's Plato, not Plado. A lot of people think I'm talking about the little, the little goofy toy that kids play with and make things out of. But I read The Republic and several of his other works when I was in high school and early college. And I wasn't very athletic throughout my entire life, and so I never did sports much in high school or junior high or anything like that. But Plato, he would write in, they call it the dialogue form, and his most common character was Socrates, and he's using his school teacher Socrates as the main character, and they're doing all these dialogues about different issues and things like that. And one of the themes that Socrates would talk about is the fact that a man needs to build the body and the mind. Just not just your mind, but you also need to build your body as well. And I think that also goes to the fact that Plato and a lot of the Greek philosophers and Greeks back at the time would not just build their minds, but they would also wrestle, they would box. And so they really believed that a person should be able to do both. And so when I was in college, it was, like I said, it was just a small community college, so they didn't have much as far as sports or anything like that, but they did have a judo club. And so, my brother had tried judo and had talked about it, and I was like, well, I'm going to try it, and I really got hooked on it. And so I guess that would be why I got into judo. Now, as far as Aikido, the way they were just starting an Aikido program at the college as well. It was the same instructor, Bill Kincaid, and at the time, and he was a black belt in Judo and a black belt in Aikido, and I took both of his classes, and I really enjoyed them. And then after the semester was over, I switched over to the regular school, which was almost heaven, Aikido and Judo, and just from there on, I always stayed with it, even through law school. Let me just put in here, even through law school, I stayed with Judo. There wasn't any Judo schools in Morgantown at the time, so I would drive 3 nights a week. I would drive 45 minutes into Pennsylvania and study with Mrs. Pam Russell and her husband, Bob Russell, in Carmichael's, Pennsylvania, and studied Judo with them for 3 years. And really, they just blew my mind of what could be done with it. And, the rest is history, I guess, right now. Right.
Of course, there's a couple of jiu-jitsu tournaments actually coming, in August. I think one is August 4th and then August 11th. Are you going to be competing in any of those?
Yeah. Well, I'm signed up. I'm signed up to do the jiu-jitsu tournament August 4th in Reynoldsburg, Ohio, at Dustin Ware's school. It's Ohio Combat Sports Academy.
Okay,
and then August 11th. Yeah. August 11th, I'm signed up to do that as well, and that's at Fuji. I don't know the title. It's the Fuji tournament in Belpre, Ohio.
Let me ask you this, Travis. Do you, and I don't know, but do you enjoy competing?
I find value in it, but I can't say that I enjoy it. I don't have that because there's some people that just have a burning desire to compete. Right. The aspect of the martial art that's always intrigued me is the process. What's this action going to do to my opponent's body, and what's this going to do to that? The benefit of competing is that you really just get to test your mettle. You get to test what you're made of. Right. Because you're going against an opponent you don't often, in a match that you don't often fight with, and you're going to go against somebody that maybe you've never fought with, and there's a psychological aspect to that. So that's probably the closest thing that you'll ever get to combat without actually being in a combat situation or a self-defense situation, and you'll get to see what you're going to do.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think when I compete, it really intensifies the level of my training, and it does get you better. I guess you're thinking about 3 or 4 weeks out, and you're really more focused. I think you're really putting in a little extra time, more so than you usually do. But when I competed my first time, and I had an interview with Professor Ware. I have a stage fright issue even when I perform as a musician, but when it came down to competing as an athlete, it's just like it took it to a totally different level. I was petrified, and I honestly, I don't like competing at all, but I think it really helps me to, have something to work towards, I guess, but,
yeah.
But anyway,
I agree with that. Go ahead.
Well, at this time, first of all, I appreciate you, coming on the show, and first of all, I want to go ahead and I guess we're having practice tonight at 6, but
it's Marietta Combat Sports in Marietta, Ohio.
That's right.
Give a plug in for you, Dave.
Well, anyway, that's about all for the Bully Resistance Show with David Wells. Before we go, I just want to thank again all the sponsors for supporting the Bully Resistance Show. Also, I just want to encourage all the listeners, if you can go to www.davebond.org and subscribe to the Bully Resistance Show. And also, if you can, give us a 5-star rating. This way will help us to become more visible to all the listeners. So until next time, thanks for listening.